So, there we go. This week, we're hearing from the last of the 3 current visiting scholars with us from KCMC, which is Winnie. And Winnie is one of the PhD students, most of you know, that's studying at KCMUCO. And we are really excited to hear a little bit about how things are going with her thesis and her progress in the program. As she is in process, I'm sure that Winnie would appreciate any questions or comments you may have. This is a learning process for all of us. So while we're going to learn from her presentation, she would also, I'm sure, rather hear some criticisms and questions from you guys as friends than when she goes to defend her dissertation. So without further ado, Winnie, you may take it away.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
Maybe speak up a little bit more.
Good morning. So I'm going to share my work on alcohol-related injuries among young people in northern Tanzania and towards formulating intervention to reduce alcohol use and injuries. So, a brief background on this work is, so among alcohol attributable death, 32% are from unintentional injuries and 13.7% from intentional injuries. That makes about half of all deaths that are attributable to alcohol to be from injuries. And even though injuries can affect everyone, we know that injuries they have a significant higher impact on young people. And currently, road injuries and alcohol-related injuries are the leading cause of preventable death among adolescent and young people in sub-Saharan Africa. So the situation in Tanzania there is no exact data on drinking among young people, but studies have shown an increase in underage drinking over time. So in terms of intervention, brief intervention has been proven effective in high-income settings to reduce alcohol use and alcohol-related harms in the emergency department, among injury patients in the emergency department. And currently, it's been adapted to the Swahili and Kilimanjaro context in northern Tanzania. So the effectiveness, or if this intervention will work among young people, remains not well known. And evidence shows that young people have unique needs, and we need tailor-made interventions that would address their unique needs, because it's a stage where there is a lot of changes. It's a transition from being a child to the adulthood. So we need tailor-made intervention for young people. So this study aims to come with a modified brief intervention that will consider the unique needs of young people presenting with alcohol-related injuries. So specifically in this study, we are going to answer this objective. First, we're going to determine the prevalence of alcohol-related injuries and assess the needs of young people affected by alcohol-related injuries. And then we'll look at the effect of age on the BNI outcomes among patients with alcohol-related injuries to understand how does it act in different age groups, the young one versus the older one. And then based on the needs we have identified and knowing how it works, we'll explore various facilitator and patient preferences on the BNI. And specifically, this is for young people. What do they want? Who do they want to give them the intervention? Which component did they like? Which component they didn't like? And consequently, we'll co-design the BNI for young injury patients based on their identified needs, the barriers, the facilitators, and their preferences. And later in the journey, conduct a feasibility study for the developed modified BNI. So for the first aim, which is to look at the prevalence of alcohol-related injuries and needs of young people presenting with alcohol-related injuries in the emergency department in northern Tanzania, we are using secondary data from the trauma registry. So our study participants, the young people, have been defined as per WHO, anyone aged less or equal to 24 years. And these are the people who are presenting at KSMC Emergency Department for acute injury, or which is less than 24 hours. And the dependent variable are alcohol use prior to injury, and I'm also exploring alcohol use 1 month prior to injury. This is also based on literature. And also I'm looking at harmful alcohol use as defined by price. So prior to injury, breathalyzer positive, and audit greater than 8. So some of the independent variables here, I'm looking at socio-demographic characteristics, alcohol-related characteristics, and health variables. And so far what the data is showing us, among these young injury patients, so the data, we have a limitation that the study participants have to be aged 18. So these study participants are aged 18 to 24 years. And so far what we see, they are predominantly young males with a median age of 22. And most of these injury patients have at least secondary education. So 65% have secondary education or higher. And when we look at employment, the majority are employed. So 8.7 are employed, but we see we have some students who are presenting with alcohol-related injuries. So about 14.8 are students. They have fair income of 1,500 Tanzanian shillings per month. This is their personal income. So when we look at their alcohol use, 11.9%, the first figure, figure 1, 11.9% reported to have used alcohol 6 hours before the injury. So this is like 1 in 10 used alcohol 6 hours prior to injury. And among the ones who had said they did not use alcohol, they did not admit to use alcohol, the ones who had refused a breathalyzer test at 13.9. So this number might look low, but if someone said they had not used alcohol and refused a breathalyzer, the bias is more likely they had also used alcohol. But then, well, this 13.9% refused a breathalyzer test. And when we look for the information for those who were using alcohol for the past 1 month, and this is translated to current drinkers, as some other studies have tried to look into it. So 19.2% had used alcohol in the past 1 month. So if we look into this, if 19.2% used alcohol in a month, and then we are seeing a very big percent presenting with alcohol-related injuries. So it means like these people could be harmful, like they could have very direct impact of alcohol use, and it could be the cause of their injuries. So looking at the audit scores of this participant, so only 14, so this is among the, looking for the audit scores for the participant who reported to use alcohol 1 month prior to injuries, like they were active, they are current drinkers. Only 14.4 were on the low risk score, and the rest were having an audit score of 8 and above. We furthermore tried to classify the distribution of the audit score, and we can see 15.6% have possible alcohol dependence. They have an audit score of 20 to 40. And this is very alarming. And majority, of course, are on the audit score zone of 8 to 15, which can be called like they are on hazardous drinking risk level. And when we go further and look at the alcohol use and drinking behavior, the drink score, which looks at the consequences of drinking, we see the median score is 17, with an interquartile range of 9 to 28, which can be translated to like half of the participants have experienced consequences that resulted from a drink score 17. And when you look at their drinking days, the median number of drinking days is 4. And with an interquartile range of 2 to 8. So this median number of drinking days is per month. So if we see like we have a median drinking days of 4, but only when you look at binge drinking days, the median number of days is 1. So what this tells us is only 1 day of binge drinking, but this, even a single day can put you at a very high risk of getting consequences like alcohol-related injuries. So we're also examining whether age moderates the effect of brief intervention, which has been adapted for Tanzanian setting, which is called Punguza Pombe kwa Afya Yako. So we are looking at how age moderates the effect of PPKY on the intervention outcomes, and with the main focus on binge drinking days as the primary outcome, and other secondary outcomes as number of drinking days, drinking amount, or drink and pH 9. So our hypothesis is that the effect of the PPKY on the outcomes will vary depending on age. So methodologically, our study participants are injury patients who are aged 18 years and above, who are presenting at KSMC Emergency Department for an acute injury less than 24 hours. And sorry, I didn't add the inclusion criteria, but here we're using the data for PRACT. As I said, this would be a patient who either had an audit score of 8 and above, breathalyzer positive, or intoxicated or reported alcohol use prior to injury. So our dependent variable primary outcome is binge drinking days, and secondary outcomes are alcohol-related consequences as recorded by the drink. Frequency of alcohol use, audit score in page 29. The moderating variable is age. So here we are comparing the young ones aged 8 to 24 and the older ones who are 25 years and above. So the data has people up to 86 years. And independent variables, there is time and intervention group. So what we see is males, they are predominant both for the younger and the older age groups. So like 93.9% of the young people are male and 93.1% of the older people are male. And it's not in those zones, so Chaga are the majority of the tribe that is more affected. So when we look at the things like employment, so here I've only highlighted the groups which had statistically significant difference between younger ones and the older ones. So there was a statistical difference in employment, and we can see that the young ones are more in skilled employment compared to the older ones, but the older ones are more in professional employment, and yeah, and the young ones are more in skilled employment compared to the older ones, while the older ones are more in professional employment than the young ones. So when we look at the monthly income, also there was a significant difference in monthly personal income, and we can see that the older ones are making a median of 500,000 Tanzanian shillings more than the younger ones. So we see there is a significant, when you look at the socio-demographic characteristics, we see there are significant socioeconomic differences in education, employment, and income. And when we look at some primary and secondary outcomes at baseline. When we look at the number of drinking days, the median number of drinking days is high in older ones than the younger ones. So the older ones have a median of 6 drinking days per month, while the younger ones have 4. And this tells us that the older ones drink on many more days than the younger ones. And when you look at the drinking amount, the older ones drink more with a mean of 24.3 compared to the young ones, which is 14.7. But when we look at the PHQ-9 score, the younger people, they have younger ones, they have higher PHQ-9 score compared to the older ones. So there were no significant differences in binge drinking days and in drink scores and the audience. So what we see here is, even though the older people engage in more and frequent drinking days, the younger ones are the ones who are experiencing more depressive symptoms. And also, we can say that the older ones are engaging in more drinking days because maybe they're built tolerance, or they even started younger, so like they're drinking more and more, the risk is accumulating over time. So here, sorry, I had to remove this morning the results of table 3 because it showed the intervention is not improving any outcome, and I received input that I was modeling the wrong variable. So I was using the wrong variable for binge drinking days. I was modeling it at baseline and not for the consecutive follow-up period. So I'll share updates and results for the effect of the moderation after I change the outcome variable. Thank you.
Very nice. Thank you, Winnie.
All right.
Great presentation.
Great. Questions or comments? So there, I see there are a few comments in the chat. Liz shared on the bar graph things. You might want to add the percentages consistently like you did in some of the figures. And Annapurna says, you might want to specify the unit for the drinking amount on, I'm not sure which slide it was referenced, but for table 2, the primary and secondary outcomes. And then here's a question for you, Winnie. Why do you think younger people are having more depressive symptoms like you showed toward the end? You want to talk more about that?
Why do I think younger people are having more depressive symptoms? Yes. So this can be explained, like when you look at alcohol-related consequences, they're worse in younger people than the older ones. So depression is one of the alcohol-related consequences that I was interested, which was measured by PHQ-9. So for me, it's a very interesting finding, but literature has been supplementing that we expect it to be worse when a young one uses it because they're still in a stage of developmental transition. Like we expect alcohol to affect them more compared to when you are an older one.
So Winnie, this is a great conversation. So you are seeing this as depression as a consequence of alcohol use. You're not seeing it as alcohol as a consequence of depression. We've had lots of conversations recently that it might be a chicken or the egg problem of what comes first.
Yep.
And from what I'm hearing you saying, you think it's a consequence. Could it be the other way around? Could our youth population be more depressed and are starting to use alcohol as a treatment mechanism?
Also possible, yeah.
Yeah, of course, you would need to have that caveat of this data is not really showing you the temporality, so that's important. And we have looked at that, as Catherine alluded to, and I'm sure that if you have questions about what that has, although I think you were familiar, especially having just worked a lot with Mia on the presentation. But it's true, if you look in the literature and there's some theory, but there's also some empirical evidence that it can go one way, the other way, both ways. And of course, they can have a common cause, right? There can be things that are causing depressive symptoms and causing alcohol use that's a third variable. So that's important. Lots of positive feedback in the chat. Any other questions or comments for Winnie?
Winnie, I know that the population here, they are all above 18 years old, right?
Yes.
And we were talking about how there have been some studies saying that even the younger population is starting to drink more and more. Do you think that these results that we have here would apply to that younger population? Or do you think that's a totally different mechanism? Their drinking behavior is different versus this young, but still an adult population that we have in the study?
So I think I don't expect the same resources we have generally work for the younger people, because I think that the drinking, of course, I'm going to answer that the drinking behavior is different and they have unique needs. Let's say things like we have the brief intervention right now being given by the nurse. Probably they wouldn't want to talk to the nurse. Maybe they would recommend a teacher or I'm just trying to think. Yeah. So I think we could have different suggestions on modification. Yeah. So I'm thinking like a bit of a very different
Framing.
Yeah.
I see. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Please feel free to share. Oh, I did have one thing, Winnie. When you reported about the alcohol, the bar graphs with the alcohol variables, the alcohol use prior to injury, the breathalyzer, and the other one, this. I'm not sure about figure 2. This is the one that Annapurna, I think, was mentioning, or maybe that was Liz. Because the second second and third ones have the percentage, but the first one doesn't.
Yes.
Yeah, Annapurna, got you. This is Liz's comment. So it'd be good to be consistent there. But the refused breathalyzer test, I'm not actually certain about that the way you're interpreting that question. I think that variable includes refused and unable. Okay, so that's an important distinction, because if someone refuses a breathalyzer test, we can theorize why they're refusing, and that may be suspicious, like probably if they refuse, they're more likely to have a positive breathalyzer, maybe. But because you consider that these people are having a recent injury, I've seen it firsthand. There are many people that can't perform the breathalyzer because maybe their lung capacity is limited, maybe the machine is not working that day, whatever it might be. So be careful interpreting that. And I'm afraid, which is a problem with the data, that there's not a distinction of the refused or the unable, which perhaps next time, well, we might be throwing out breathalyzer altogether, but it's an important one, so be careful there.
So one thing I want to add on to what you're saying, Ashley, about this slide in particular, is I don't know any sense of numbers and populations throughout these 3 scales. And so what I would prefer to see is kind of like a tree that tells me the whole population and where everyone sits, so that you don't lose any people and you understand the context of that percentage amongst the big population. So like if you have 100 people and we know 15 or 20 of them said yes to drinking alcohol before the prior 6 hours, and of the other 80, 10 said, I don't want to take the breathalyzer, and then etc. So that way you define your population better, and it's visual and it's all put together. So that kind of branching descriptive piece I think is really cool to see. And Ashley, we talked about the name of that graph. Do you remember what it was? It was something I sent you last week.
Something really funny like a harky or a darky or narky. It's something weird. But
Something.
that graph would be a cool one, but it could even be a Venn diagram, Catherine, which actually
Yeah,
could be
agreed.
interesting. I know it's a little bit complicated, like to technically do, but it could be a Venn diagram showing those different groups, which would answer a question that we've often been asking ourselves, which is, you heard me say, maybe we'll throw breathalyzer out. And it's because there's very few people who screen in on the breathalyzer, but don't screen in on one of the other criteria. Because if you have a positive breathalyzer, you're gonna have a hard time saying you weren't drinking before the injury. For example, but I can tell you what that is called.
There you go. Gabby can help.
It's the one that's like, looks like ribbons. If anybody knows, it's like very big, like Time magazine type of graphic. Harky
Sean says robo.
ribbon graph. Yeah, oh, there's another one.
Pankey, Pankey. Sankey, Pankey? Sankey.
Sankey, I heard him call it Sankey, that's it, Sankey, Sankey, Sanky. But a ribbon graph, I think, is something else that Joao was referring to. Oh, there is an E, Sankey. All right. Also, don't miss everybody, Joao put that he much appreciates that Winnie used the template, which is in our gigantic Google Drive, so that we kind of have a nice brand and we make sure we attribute all of the proper parties, especially, you know, in this case where, you know, you have KCMC, GEMINI, Duke, Emergency Medicine, Global Health Institute. So thanks for doing that, and others take note and please do the same.